बढ़िया दिख रहा है क्या?
Yes, Shivangi, we have attendees.
Cool. That's okay.
Okay, listen. Is raising hand. Shivangi,
हाँ.
I just want to test run the video once. I mean, I'll be sharing the screen and let me know if you are able to hear the sound of the video, okay?
ठीक है, कर.
Can you see it?
I can. Sound on कर.
It's on.
Thank you for joining us for this year's Global Evaluation Week, where for the next 5.
Got it. You might want to do full screen on this video.
Yeah, I will. Once. All right.
Cool.
Okay, we are set.
Hi, Devika, can you hear me? Shivangi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm sorry, I was on mute. I forgot that.
Yeah, so I still can't see, I'm still seeing speaker view, not gallery view, and can't see the other participants.
No. Okay, Ashutosh. Wait.
I'm going to mute myself. So please ask to unmute if you need me to come in verbally.
All right.
The other computer.
Yes, sir. That would be really helpful.
Okay.
So, sir, all the panelists are here. I am just waiting for all the attendees. We have some attendees here, but I think let's wait till 4:30 so that we can start.
Hello everyone. Hello, how are you?
Hello.
हेलो।
कैसे हैं आशुतोष जी?
बहुत बढ़िया। आप कैसे हैं? अभी आप
All
कहाँ हैं? दिल्ली में ही
yes,
हैं?
sir. Yeah, we are working from home.
ओके।
Yeah.
So it's not sort of rotation basis. I mean, you are 100% working from home only.
Yes, yes, yes. Only critical staffs have been asked to go from 1st of June. For instance, admin and all those who can take care of the sanitization of the office and all. But
Okay.
rest of all the programmatic staffs are working from home. And they have been advised to work from home as far as possible.
So critical staff has been called for. And key people are working from home.
Right.
Abhay sir, this is just AJ sir hinting that both he and Naval sir belong to the key essential staff of
No,
DM.
no. Key people, Shivangi, key people are working from home.
Oh, no, 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 no.
So we have most of the DMU team here. I'm just waiting till 4-5 more minutes, and then we can possibly start with the panel discussion.
घंटा अभी इसमें बिजी में रहूंगा, ठीक है कोई फोन।
Hello, Navaljeet ji, how are you?
Thank you, sir. How are you?
I'm good. So how long you have been here?
Almost, sir, in July I'll be completing 2 years.
Okay.
Hello, Naval ji.
How are you, sir?
Very well. Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm fine.
We are meeting electronically.
Yeah.
This is how the world has become.
But somehow I have found in last these 2-3 months, this is a very good communication system. In fact, we were calling people from all over India and we were traveling also. So I think the work which we have done in last 2 months, so it was not even otherwise possible if we had physically communicated with each other.
So it's like e-office. Earlier we were very apprehensive about e-office, moving
Yes.
file from e-office instead of physical one, but now it is very efficient and comfortable.
But as far as our ministry is concerned, we don't have even a single physical file. Our entire office is e-office. Even we don't have even communication from the states also on physical papers.
So same here. Everything is on
Yeah.
e-file. So it's not just the moment of file, even the file itself is going through e-office.
Even the states proposals, they come through portal only.
Okay. So you have a different portal for that. So I mean, in NITI Aayog right now, maybe we are getting hard copies and then those are getting converted to electronic format and then routed through e-file and all that. So it's not, that proposal itself is coming electronically from them.
Yeah. When Shivangi will give me opportunity, I'll tell something about that.
Sir, there will be plenty of opportunity. I'm really impressed with the MI systems that you have built, and I would really hope that you can share with the wider audience about them. So I'm just waiting for DG sir to join in, and I think with his permission we can start. It's 4:29 on the clock, so we might as well be on time for this one. Would request Devika to check if we can start right now.
Yeah, sometimes they should also be before time.
Definitely, sir. Definitely.
Andy DG sir has joined. Would you want me to start with the video?
Yeah, sure. So just a little introduction. Thank you so much everyone for joining right now. Welcome to the third DMEO panel discussion as part of the GE Local International Evaluation Week on institutionalization of M&E, entry points and demand generation. We have had 2 webinars in the past, and both of the recordings are available, and I highly encourage you to check them out. One of them is on partnerships in M&E, and the other is on really interesting data quality in M&E. To start the session, I would like to view a message from Dr. Shagun Sabharwal. She is the director of CLEAR JPAL South Asia. And as inauguration ceremonies and kickoffs have not been possible due to the virtual nature of the event, we have started to start this entire panel discussion with a video from her. I would now request my colleague and the technical moderator of this panel, Devika, to present the video, post which we can start the session. Devika, please.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this year's Global Evaluation Week, where for the next 5 days, we invite you to participate in the exchange of M&E knowledge and best practices. This is a time when the strength of our community of M&E practitioners is more important than ever. We can help policymakers and other decision makers in our regions in multiple ways. For example, to assess the impact of the decisions and policies being rolled out during this time, or to recommend new evidence-based solutions, or even to help governments understand priority areas through data. We have a very exciting week ahead. This year, Eval Week will feature over 250 events across the globe, including more than 20 webinars in South Asia. All of these events are free and open to the public. The events in South Asia are being hosted by 19 different organizations across 4 countries and will focus on a wide range of topics, including leveraging real-time data to aid crisis response, the challenges of evaluation in crisis situations, innovations in measurements, and the sharing of results of evaluations across a number of sectors, including gender, environment, labor, health, and education. I would like to personally thank all of the event organizers, panelists, and the webinar participants for convening to exchange their M&E knowledge and experiences. By doing so, you're playing an important role in strengthening local M&E capacity and broadening the community of evidence-based decision makers. These goals are central to the CLEAR Initiative's mission and are the inspiration for the Global Evaluation Week. Thank you for contributing your efforts to this movement, and I look forward to seeing you throughout the week.
Thank you, Devika. That was amazing. It's so great that we can address a group of audience virtually as well. So again, thank you so much for joining in on a Friday evening. I understand that this is a huge time commitment for you, but I can assure you that the kind of panelists that we have, the rich experience that they bring to the table, it will be an amazing takeaway for you. We have a panel which has a lot of experience in policy, in government sector, in project management, in social impact, and they would be sharing their experiences with you. To make it in a more engaging format, I highly request you to use the Q&A button right at the bottom to engage with us. Use it liberally, ask as many questions as possible. Some housekeeping rules that we would want to discuss right now. First, the structure. What will happen is that in this panel discussion, it will start with a brief bio of all the panelists, wherein I'll tell what have they been doing, what interesting work they have done in the past. It will be followed by opening remarks, approximately 5 minutes for each of those speakers, and then a moderated panel discussion on the topic. Post this, we will have time for Q&A based on the questions that you have posted in the little Q&A box. And then we'll conclude with some concluding remarks from all of these panelists. If there is I have seen this happening in the past. There's a possibility that people are so interested and they have completely flooded the question answer box. If there is a possibility like that and we can't answer the questions in the stipulated 1 hour, then we'll be happy to take those questions on an email. Use that email to send in questions. Use the email to just send in hi. all open for that. Moving on, let's just introduce our eminent panelists, starting alphabetically, Dr. Abhay Kumar. He is working as the head evidence and results units of the United Nations World Food Programme, India Country Office. Prior to joining WFP, Dr. Kumar was executive director of the Lok Sharya Foundation, a policy think tank based in New Delhi, and also worked as associate fellow at the Institute of Human Development, New Delhi. His areas of interest are food and nutrition security, poverty and human development. He has completed a number of evaluation and research projects with significant policy implications supported by UNWFP, UNDP, Planning Commission, Ministry of Rural Development, Ministry of Human Resource Development, etc. He has several publications in the form of research articles published in peer-reviewed national and international journals, project report, books, working papers, monographs, and mimeographs. Dr. Kumar completed his postgraduate degree in geography from Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi, and MPhil and PhD in population studies from JNU, New Delhi. We welcome you, sir. Joining him is Mr. Ashutosh Jain. He belongs to 1992 batch of Indian Telecom Service, ITS 92. He has worked extensively in Department of Telecommunication and BSNL in planning, execution, and commissioning of projects and operations of telecom infrastructure and services. He has been driving mission mode pan-India e-governance project of approximately 2,000 crore, the crime and the criminal tracking network systems in the Ministry of Home Affairs. That project integrated all the police stations and higher offices into the network, including state and national level data management. From 2017, we have had the pleasure of working with him, wherein at DMO, he has been leading monitoring and evaluation of all the government programs and schemes. We welcome you, AJ, sir. Joining him is Dr. Navaljeet Kapoor. He did his MBBS from Medical College, Patiala in 1988 and served as medical officer in Cheston TB Hospital, Ambala from 1989 to 1992. He has, after being selected in the Indian Revenue Services in 1992, he has worked in various positions in assessment, administration, investigation, international taxation, and as an appellate authority. He was selected as the best officer for infra project for undertaking multiple projects in Bombay and Nasik. During the last 2 years as Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, he has taken various IT initiatives for streamlining budget release and monitoring process. He has actually enabled a paradigm shift from a paper-based monitoring to a data-based monitoring. We are extremely grateful to have you here, sir.
Thank you.
And last but not the least, we have Romil Ravi. He is an MLE lead in DMO Niti Aayog. He has been working with DMO for the past 1 year, and he is an engineer with a post-graduation in business management and NIT and IIM alumnus. He has 8 years of experience working in manufacturing and social sector in operations, greenfield projects, strategic sourcing with the government at a district level and at a national level. He leads the output outcome monitoring framework team at DMO and is involved in institutionalization of the framework, interministerial coordination. His areas of expertise are infra projects, execution and financing, analyzing administrative data at different levels of the government. So as you can see, we have such an amazing panel, having experiences in pretty much everything and having experience in successfully implementation of a lot of projects. So please, I would request that ask away as many questions as possible, absorb as much information as you can from these illustrious panelists. Before we go onto the opening remarks, I would just want to set the context. I'm sure that most of you would have thought about the subject of the panel discussion. The panel will focus on 3 elements. If you deconstruct those 3 elements, the first one being an entry point. Now, what does an entry point mean exactly? An entry point in terms of M&E is basically like where M&E can potentially be used and where can it enter into a program life cycle. We will talk about, in this particular aspect, we will talk about as to what is the current scenario where M&E is being used. What are the potential other entry points where M&E can be used, and how can we utilize the feedback coming from the M&E systems? The second aspect of the program is we have called as demand generation. We clearly have evidence in the form of MIS data, evaluation reports being conducted across ministries, across multilaterals, across the political ecosystem. Now we would want to understand is that how do we generate a demand for those kind of evidence? And how do we make sure that a demand is there for such evidence so that it can be later used in. Are there any constraints related to demand generation? Are there any other areas where this evidence can be used to make data-backed decision? And lastly, tying it all together is the umbrella of institutionalization, which is actually the most important concept. We have identified the areas wherein we can leverage M&E, which is basically the entry points. We have identified how to generate demand. But if we don't focus on institutionalization, it will just become another practice which is not consistent in nature, and just like another one of those pilot projects which never sees the light of the day. So ideally, the M&E systems should be seamless with the design of a new program. We learn from the panelists as to how their experience has been in institutionalizing, and most importantly, what really works in institutionalization and what doesn't. And therefore, with the context setting, I now move to invite my panelists for their opening remarks. So starting with you, Abhay sir, would request you to start the panel with what you think, sir.
Thank you, Shivangi. Thank you so much for such a nice introduction as well as a nice context setting. It is indeed a privilege to be a part of this eminent panel, as well as also a very important topic that we are going to discuss today. First of all, thanks to you as well as to the entire DMU for considering me as one of the panelists for this discussion. And it's of course an honor as well as a privilege for me. Just to set the context, I would like to begin with, of course, talking about my own organization, because you know how we have built the M&E system into our own organization is something which I feel is worth discussing here in this particular group. WFP, as we have just discussed in a previous webinar a few days back in DMU, we have found that it's the world's largest humanitarian organization serving in more than 90 countries globally. And we are reaching 100 million people every day. And most of those 100 million people are in most of the difficult situations, such as those struck into conflict, war, disasters, and pandemic like COVID and all. Despite that, we have been working incessantly. Almost $9 billion we have an annual budget, and most of this money comes from the donor. We do not have any fixed money, fixed grant from somewhere. We have to collect this money from the donors to implement our programs. So organizations has a commitment to the donors. And in order to make those commitments, our executive board in the World Food Program has made the M&E system a very strong system into it, because we have to be accountable to the money that we get from the donor. Every single money that is being spent in our organization, we have to be accountable for that. So for that, the executive board has institutionalized an M&E policy, M&E strategy, and a number of other legal documents such as guidelines and others. We are trying to, use those guidelines, use those instruments to implement our programs globally in all the 90 countries that we work on. So it's embedded into the entire system, and therefore we feel that M&E system, and we find the result out of it. We try to reach one of the most vulnerable people, and we try to show the, the outcome that for which we try to work for. So this is about the UNWFP system. Coming to the general, institutionalization of the M&E into the government system, I have some of the points to mention here. You see, we are in an era of SDG. We know that we have our global goals for which each countries are committed to. And these global goals cannot be achieved if we do not implement our programs at local, national, subnational, and local levels. And to implement those programs, to have the outcome of those programs, we must have an M&E system, rather a strong M&E system. But I'd like to mention here that institutionalization is not a one-time process. It's an ongoing process. Even in the countries where, such as Canada, where the first evaluation policy has come in 1977, when I was, born at that point of time, they are also still struggling, reviving, revising, and they are trying to adopt newer methods, newer systems, newer techniques. So it's an ongoing process, and we should not consider it as a one-time process that we prepare a money policy and our job is done. No, that's not. We have to take it forward, because we have seen very recently, few days back, we had a webinar in DMU, and we have discussed about the Mexico's learning on the evaluation system. They have gone far, ahead in the M&E institutionalization of the M&E, but they are still not able to, take it forward to each and every departments inside the Mexico. So similarly, we have a number of countries examples where we are seeing that the M&E institutionalization is in a different phase, and we have a little bit of M&E institutionalization in some departments, in some, government ministries, line ministries and all. So it varies widely. But if we do not have a wide, overarching system, overarching framework, then it is bound to, have a differential impact in different systems. There are number of countries which have gone for this M&E capacity institutionalization. And in the developed countries, we have an example of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Switzerland, Sweden, and all. In the developing countries also, it's not that only developed countries can afford the M&E institutionalization. We have an examples from the countries like Nepal. They are also now struggling. They are also now trying to build the M&E capacity into the programmatic architecture. We have an example from Malaysia, Philippines, South Africa, Uganda, and there are countries from the developing world which are now trying to institutionalize the M&E system.
That's great, sir. That's great to hear. I think when we take outcomes and we talk about outcomes and institutionalization, I really have to call Mr. Ashutosh Jain to step in and start with the opening remarks, specifically in the line of what Dr. Abhay has shared.
Okay, at the outset, thank you very much, Shivangi. At the outset, I must congratulate, appreciate, and thank DMU team, Shivangi, and especially the partnership team for engaging with Clear and J-Paul for engaging DMU into this particular week. To start with, you mentioned about the entry point, so I'll definitely, I'll prefer to segregate monitoring and evaluation in terms of monitoring is something which happens on day-to-day basis. So for me, entry point for monitoring even starts during pre-launch phase. So, I mean, whether it is designing of project, whether it is, making the structure, when we are taking different stakeholders into the perspective. So all that time and monitoring starts. As far as evaluation is concerned, definitely depending upon the life cycle of a scheme, it should be introduced not only at the, right now in government, normally happens at the end of the scheme. I mean, towards the end of a scheme when we are looking for appraisal or continuation of the scheme. So definitely it is happening. But during different life cycles, during mid-course correction, during process finalization, maybe it is not happening in a very frequent way. So coming back to monitoring, I'm a strong proponent of having it on a day-to-day basis. Maybe since you have mentioned about me involved into CCTNS project earlier while I was in the Ministry of Home Affairs, I would like to quote a particular example which will be helpful in visualizing the importance of monitoring. So this project was actually conceptualized way back in 2009. I joined this project in 2012. So when I joined, almost everything was in place in terms of central project management unit was in place. State project management unit for all the states separately was in place. Mobilization advance was given to the states and UT separately. And even vendors had started supplying the computer peripherals to the police stations. There were around 14,000 police stations to which this project was covering. So if you remember, somewhere in 2013, there was a huge upward movement of dollar prices. So, I mean, it was hovering around 46 and suddenly in no time it went up to 64, 65 rupees a dollar. So then our vendors, were in a very pathetic situation. They were not in a position while complying the RFP conditions, while the prices they quoted it was getting nearly impossible for them to supply the computer peripherals. So we have to see, I mean, one way could have been that we could have gone by the RFP condition, all onus could have been on the contractors. But then we realized that in case they are not able to meet that, how can we take the project forward? So getting, we were almost on daily basis, we were having meetings with the SPMUs, with the vendors, with the CPMU, and then we observed that in case we can have within the purview of RFP, within the government instructions, if we can have some relaxation for the contractors, we can facilitate them, maybe we can move forward. So what we did, we slightly simplified the payment terms in the form that instead of having a statewide perspective on a particular milestone to be achieved, we converted into district wise. So in case they have done some aspect completed for a particular district, maybe partly for that proportionately amount we can release so that they can also maintain some cash flow. So the whole idea is until unless we do the monitoring, we get the feedback from the implementing agencies, the stakeholders, especially the contractors or the vendors, we cannot ensure that the project is rolling out. So similar thing applies for any scheme or program. So therefore, I'll just repeat that monitoring is something which we have to do on daily basis. So there is absolutely no point for, I mean, what is the specific entry point for monitoring? So coming back to evaluation, evaluation is something, maybe if we take example of China, there normally, as per the best information available to me, they incubate the program over there. Maybe they come up with 2, 3 or more options. They incubate in different parts of the geography, and then they see what is the effect of that particular program. Definitely the outcome cannot be perceived in a very short time, but definitely the process, the structure, the implementing agencies, the stakeholders can be assessed, their needs and how well the program is going on can be assessed in a short time. And then depending upon the success of those programs as a pilot in a small area, maybe then they can be scaled up. So the point I'm trying to make in evaluation also, it can be started at the initial stage itself in terms of the process and the how the whole program has been structured. So, and definitely at mid-course also, in case of CCTNS also, we engaged with IIPA, we sent the teams to few of the states, few of the districts. We had interaction with the implementing agency, the head over there, the vendors, the SPMUs. We got quite a lot of feedback from them, and then we tried to see how can we take forward the program. So mid-course evaluation or correction is equally important. So point of entry is definitely important for evaluation in terms of mid-course correction, and definitely at the end for the appraisal stage. As far as evaluation is concerned, my point is that right now, maybe in government, if you talk about the government systems, right now somehow the perception is,
I think we can
just last line. It is seen as a performance assessment of an individual or a team. So rather, it should be seen as a forward-looking course correction mechanism. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. I feel that we have covered even the panel discussion questions in the opening remarks. I would now request Naval sir to address the audience, sir.
Thanks, Shivangi. So before I say anything, I will just like to read through the first few lines which you have sent me in the note. I'll start my discussion from that. You have said government tends to be a large, complex and opaque system, understood best by those within it. So if you see my background, I'm a doctor, then a revenue service officer. As a doctor also and a Indian Revenue Service also. So you are an authority in yourself. Whatever you say as a doctor, you have to take this. Patient doesn't ask so many questions. Even as a revenue officer, somebody is coming to you as a assessee or as a appeal, whatever you say. So more or less that is final. You have to pass a order. But when I came here as a joint secretary, it was in July 2018, almost 2 years back. My secretary, in the first week of August, he told me, Naval, we have to ensure that the entire areas in the scholarship division, those have to be cleared. So it was 1st of August, I had joined on 18th of July. So we were given 2 weeks that by 15th of August, the announcement has to be made that in respect of all these states, areas have been cleared. So first I asked my division, ki, what are the pending areas of different states? They said, sir, we have written letter to all these states and we are not getting any reply from that. So there are hardly any responses, and even if there are responses, they are not complete. So I said, okay, give me the number of different principal secretaries or the concerned authorities. You don't believe there was no system of having such communication. The list was not updated. Even most of the secretaries, either they had changed or their number was changed. And I found a total disconnect between the implementing agency, the government of India who was giving the funds, and the states. So I started, after taking numbers, I started conversation with the states. When I talked to them, their point of view was totally different. They said, sir, we have so many times sent the proposals, but we are not getting any response from the ministry. Multiple times we have sent. So I found the process of correspondence was very complex. From undersecretary here, the letter will go to the secretary there, then secretary will mark it to the director, then director to the undersecretary, like this. And the reverse also, when it comes from there, it will come to the secretary. By the time it reaches the section officer or the concerned official who has to process the note, it is more than 2 months. So first thing which I thought was there has to be a communication mechanism between the different stakeholders. So when we were developing the portal, we made a communication module so that they can not only communicate, they can also upload their documents through that, so that there is no scope of distrust that he didn't send the documents or there was a delay on my part. Second, coming to the monitoring mechanism, in Government of India, I found it very interesting that I didn't have any earlier experience of working in ministry. We were giving 100 crores to a state at the end of the year, maybe after a year or so, the state was giving a utilization certificate. We have spent 100 crore of rupees. I still remember, even my mother will give me 10 rupees. She will ask me where you have spent. But here we didn't have any system of asking, because state is an institution in itself. I was very surprised. I said, how many students you gave scholarship? What was the amount? In which courses they were studying? So fortunately, by that time, DBT mission had come. So DBT mission came to our rescue. So in institutionalization, DBT mission has got a very, very important role to play. So they said that not only along with UC, states have to share the beneficiary data also. Payment has to be through DBT module. There has to be compulsory linkage of Aadhaar, LGD code, and linkage with the bank. So when we started asking state, first of all, we didn't have any mechanism to capture that data. State also, they didn't have any mechanism to share that data. And out of 13 states, only 15, 16 states were using IT platform. Other states, they were still capturing on manual mode. There were different agencies who were implementing the schemes. There were different platforms. There were issues with sharing of Aadhaar, LGD code. So first what we did, we said we have to have a format of sharing of data. We identified, after discussion with states, 30 fields. Then different states had got a different level of IT preparedness. For example, in Andaman Nicobar, there was no connectivity. So we asked them to fill the data manually, and by manual entry, you share the data. Then there were some states, we asked them to share the data through Excel sheet or CSV file. And there were some advanced state where we asked them that you can send it through web services. So second part was data sharing module in the portal. Third, now you have a raw data of 30 lakh students, what to do with that data. So there comes the role of the monitoring. So what we did, we gave the entire data for data analytics to Center of Data Analytics. We did state-wise data analytics and put it on the portal. When we told them that your 10th class student is having age of 115 years. So then they were surprised. So then there were correction of data, correction of courses, and so this is the monitoring part. So this way we started doing the monitoring and evaluation in respect of all these schemes one by one.
Thank you, sir. Sir, asking कि पैसे कहाँ गए, that is the bane of our existence for at least
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
exactly. So with that, I would actually open the floor to Romil to share his opening remarks. Romil, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Shivangi. And I think just like you, I've also deconstructed the areas of discussion today, where one aspect which of the entry has already been covered by Jain sir, where he talked about the scheme life cycle, right from the initiation phase to different phase. The other aspect of looking at point of entry is also the administrative layers at which we can get feedbacks from. Where the central government, the state governments, and district levels, all these need to be taken into consideration while we are talking about getting feedbacks. Slight disagreement from sir when he said that monitoring and evaluations have to look at very differently, but I personally feel that we have to look at it more from the integrated point of view, where monitoring data feeds into evaluation and then the life cycle continues. Yeah, so that's about the entry points for feedbacks. The other is demand generation for M&E. I believe currently what the ministries use for the M&E for their scheme appraisal, that is one area where it is currently being used. The investment organizations, and I think Abhay would tell further on it, that investment organizations use M&E largely, where they have set up systems, and as we spoke about it, that there are systems, M&E systems well established, that also creates a lot of demand for M&E. The other set of organizations are the civil organizations, the CSOs, NGOs, who are working in particular areas, who demand M&E. I've looked at that. Apart from that, I believe there's a huge potential for the growth of M&E and for demand for M&E. If we have demand from the legislature, that has largely been uncovered. We have had some amount of questions coming to the organization DNU, where we look at some amount of data that the parliament seeks from us, but that is one potential area. If demand from the legislature, not just the central legislature, the parliament, but also the state legislatures, if they start demanding for M&E for particular schemes, I think that is one area that can be hugely explored and will have immense amount of opportunity. About the entries, if I've spoken about the demand for M&E, if I've spoken about, if all these entry points are seized in terms of all these being open for M&E, and the demand for it is regularized, where we set in good amount of data right from the initial phase to the end of the project. If that is ensured, I think a large part of the work that we want to do in the institutionalization would automatically be covered, along with the others that we are currently working on. Would just like to highlight a few in the paucity of time, that we are working with the ministries and the Department of Expenditure on having a quarterly review on the scheme performance. That will set in a leg of institutionalization, where performance linked budgeting, where we talk about performance linked budgeting, and if that can be done on a half yearly or a quarterly basis, that will set in some amount of institutionalization. Other than that, we are also doing a performance review by different organizations, especially the NITI verticals. I think that in itself will also institutionalize the monitoring frameworks and will go a long way in establishing M&E. So I think with those remarks, I think we can open it up for overall discussion with the panelists.
Thank you, Romil. Thank you for keeping it on time. I think I had a lot of questions for the panel, but I think so like most of them were actually covered while we were discussing opening remarks. No problem. So I think just like I had deconstructed the panel into 3 elements, with moving with the first, I think my first question would be basically to understand what is the current M&E entry point look like. And I think it has been already discussed that it is usually at the end of the program, or it's usually at the end of the development scheme, that an M&E is considered essential. I would actually now request Ashutosh sir, followed by Romil, to answer that, what according to you are the other entry points that can be leveraged? Are there any other areas, or are there any other elements in the scheme life cycle that you feel monitoring and evaluation can be embedded as a practice? Over to you, AJ sir.
Okay, so as I mentioned, monitoring is to be done on day-to-day basis. The only thing is that we have to rope in all the stakeholders, and as also mentioned by Romil, not only we have to see the technicalities, the administrative units, because in case of especially centrally sponsored schemes, if we talk about, the state is a very key stakeholder. So we have to see not only the ministry, not only the implementing agency, who is working on behalf of the ministry, then the state governments, then the district units, and then maybe at the block level, because these days we talk about the Panchayati Raj system, wherein we talk about empowerment at the lowest level. So monitoring has to happen at the lowest level. They should be empowered to see how the schemes have been performing, what are their challenges, what are their suggestions, what are the root causes of the problems which are inhibiting the success of the program implementation. So then the feedback come upwards. And in case we can ensure that we can get quick information in terms of the problems, in terms of the successes, and we should also make them realize that a single intervention from their side, a single short, small success can, be scaled up to a large scale, maybe up to a state level, and who knows, even up to a national level. So that is one aspect in monitoring, and similarly for evaluation.
Sir, Romil, would you want to add in to what sir has said?
Yes, I think just putting things in context, that at the start of the proposal, the scheme, at the design stage, when we are talking about the M&E, it doesn't make too much sense. But I think that is the most critical aspect, where if we have outline the output outcome architecture in the proposal itself, if we have the data sources clearly captured, if we have ensured that the MIS systems are built in at the scheme stage itself, I think that is the bedrock at which the M&E would stand at, and we would start getting the evidence right from there in itself. Our experiences have told us, looking at the EFCs, that a lot of schemes do not have the MIS built into the system, or for that matter, outcome monitoring architecture not built into it. So I think that is one area, if we can work on, would improve the M&E altogether itself. And then evidence feeding into the next leg, where we are looking at the monitoring, and then eventually that data feeding into the evaluations. So all those would be looked at once we have that. And in addition to that, I think if we have, as I mentioned earlier as well, if we have quarterly and half-yearly reviews of the scheme performance, that will set in a lot of progress being updated and the feedback mechanisms, and we would be in a position to do a mid-course corrections if those are flown in. And based on the mid-course, we can either have implementational improvements in terms of ironing out the bottlenecks, and also in terms of budget allocations. So those can largely be fed through if we do it at the entry stage and at the mid-level of the scheme.
Thank you so much for highlighting this, and thank you so much for using the word course correction, because that was my next question, wherein Naval sir, I would want you to weigh in as to where has your experience been using M&E for a course correction, and at what stage did the course correction happen? Like, was the development program already at the end? Was it at the beginning? What has your experience been, sir, especially with Ministry of Tribal Affairs?
As I told you, initially we did not have any system. There was in fact, there was no data at all, except for UC at the end of the year. So evaluation was earlier. What was the system of evaluation? At the end of 5 years, you will assign an agency, and even those agency will not be able to get sufficient data from the stakeholder to evaluate. So once we built up MIS, we started getting data from different states and up to the beneficiary level and up to district and school and course level. So I'll just share two things which we found. For example, we found that why large number of students from a particular state was going outside states. When we started asking them, then they said, sir, there are large number of seats which are vacant within states also, but students go outside. and it is very difficult to know the type of courses which they are going in those states, what are the type of institutions. So we found that this is one such area which is a gray area. In fact, I red flagged this area, that whenever the scheme guidelines are going to revised, we have to look into this issue, that when the courses are available within state, why students go outside. So this is not a black and white case, and the courses are also available within state. It is not that and especially the institutions are also not government institution, private institutions. Second was when we analyzed, for example, in Tripura, for MBBS course, the student was getting scholarship of 5,000, and in Tamil Nadu, he was getting a scholarship of 10 lakhs. We had, when the data was coming, only then we could realize. For example, in Tamil Nadu, and there were multiple high court cases also, and they were resisting that we should not fix a limit on the fee. So that type of things started coming only when the data came to us. So I just found that it is very important for monitoring and evaluation. First, you have to have data of the entire process flow. So if you don't have data, then it is very difficult to do monitoring and evaluation. And at the end of the scheme, it is not possible to have data. For example, if we see the Government of India system, the scheme is designed for 5 years. For example, the scheme of scholarship which we are implementing now, it came into existence in 2014. And there are no ways for mid-term correction. For any correction, you have to go to cabinet also, and there is a huge time lag when you send the file, propose it, and send it to the cabinet or EFC, or for even for smaller scheme, it is possible you can have SFC or EFC, but larger schemes like scholarship where you have budget of around 2,500 crore in a year, you have to go to cabinet. So my suggestion is that at the beginning of whenever you are preparing for EFC, SFC or cabinet note, it should be ensured that as Romil rightly said, unless until you have a way of capturing data from first user to last user. In fact, I am facing that problem in scheduled tribe component also. You won't imagine that we in tribal ministry have a budget of 2 lakh crores. 70% of that is with the states, 25% is with the 52 ministries. There are 330 schemes, and the central government budget is 52,000 crore. And when we ask them, are there any tribal beneficiaries? Where is the infrastructure created out of the funds which were meant for the tribals? I'm not saying they're not doing it, but nobody has a concrete answer that these are the beneficiaries who were benefited. This is the infrastructure created in tribal area. Ultimately, everybody say we spent that much of amount. That is what I'm saying from the very beginning. The purpose of monitoring and evaluation is to know how the amount is spent, and the ministry or the expenditure or Niti Aayog, whosoever is the monitoring authority, if as a center we are giving funds to the state, we have all right to ensure that the funds are spent for the purpose for which it was given.
Thank you for highlighting this, sir. And thank you for highlighting a very important component, that it has to be embedded into the system at multiple levels and not only at the very far end of the scheme. So with this, I would want to understand from Dr. Abhay, is that what have other nations done with respect to M&E entry points? Is that, so DMU, we ourselves are working on an M&E policy, and we would want to understand from you as to what can India do to ensure that we have M&E across entry points, to ensure that we are using that data across the scheme life cycle. Over to you, Dr. Abhay.
Thank you, Shivangi. Actually, there are different experiences from different countries, and the local socio-economic, cultural context, political context also decide what are the entry points and all in different countries' experiences. But some of the key things that is there common, which we find, which is, common thread that comes up from all the experiences is first and foremost should be this M&E component should be strategically communicated, and that should be embedded as a philosophy into the entire programmatic cycle, into the programmatic life cycle. Secondly, there should be a very high level of political commitment, because unless we have the political commitment of getting answers of all the money that is being spent, where, for instance, just now Dr. Naval was mentioning that he wanted to understand where is the money being spent. So that should come out from the top level political leadership, and they should seek for it. They should seek for this data. They should seek for that. There comes a demand, what we call. Then we should have a strong technical capacity to provide those demands of that evidence. For instance, we have suppose there are ministries, line ministries, which are working on the performance management, but if there is an M&E system which can add value to what they are doing, then only the M&E institutionalization becomes easier. So for that, we need to have a very strong M&E professional capacity within country. Then adding incentives, those who perform better can have, better, some kind of incentives to those persons. So these are some of the things which I have seen being implemented in different parts of the country around the world, wherever the M&E institutionalization has taken shape. But apart from that, I think there are a number of these countries which are also struggling. Even those countries which have institutionalized the M&E, for instance, they have brought out their M&E policy, they're still struggling to sustain it for the future. So they have newer challenges coming up, and I think that requires a whole lots of new deliberations. Thank you, Shivani.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you so much for highlighting that even with countries who have mature M&E policies, even they are facing challenges. Again, highlighting the need for institutionalization of this entire process. Thank you so much for all your comments on entry points. I think it's now time to basically analyze that how do we create a demand for all the M&E feedback that we have generated? How do we try to create a demand for all the evidence that we have generated so as to we make more data-driven decisions? And with that, Dr. Abhay, I would want you to weigh in on the fact that, do you think that there is a demand for the evidence being generated as of present? And where do you think is the demand is being generated? Is it only confined to the government, or are there any other pillars to this process? Over to you, sir.
In fact, the demand is now getting generated everywhere, both within government as well as outside government, because slowly and steadily the demand for accountability has grown up. We have a stronger civil society today than before, and they have all been asking for more accountability, better accountability today. So the demand is there from the government as well as from in the non-governmental sector also. In the non-governmental sector, we have most of the non-governmental programs are being run by the donors. So whenever they give money, they try to, seek this M&E inputs, evidences against where the money has been spent. So there is now, I can see the increase in the demand for the evidence from the program, and it is across either government or non-government. So that is how I see it right now.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. With that, Romil, would you want to weigh in on the fact that what are the constraints towards generating this demand? Like, do you feel that there are any challenges wherein by this demand generation is not happening organically? Romil, you have to unmute yourself.
Really sorry. Yeah, there are 3 points that I would like to mention here, which I believe are the constraint. One, M&E traditionally has been looked at more from a policing point of view, not from an improvement point of view. I mean, if you can anecdotally see that it is more of a police rather than as a doctor, whereas we have to see M&E more as a doctor, where the earlier we get the signs of any ailment, the better for us to make systemic improvements. So that is the mindset that I see as a constraint, and that needs to improve. The other is capacity constraints. Of course, I think Naval sir would be able to say better on this, but at different levels of government, what we believe the capacity on M&E are very limited. The ministries at the central level, the state level, and at the district level altogether. The last one, which I think we are already working on drafting a national M&E policy, I think, and getting a statutory status to that would go a long way in enforcing that. That is one area where because it doesn't even exist as an executive resolution, the M&E establishment of an M&E, that puts in a lot of constraint in having demand for M&E. Once we have the statutory status, I think, and if you link it with the standing committees of the parliament and other legislative assemblies, I think that will definitely automatically create a demand for M&E in the system.
Thank you so much, Romil. Those were very crisp 3 points. With that, over to you, Naval sir. Would you want to weigh in on how can you create the demand by giving some incentives? Can you accelerate this demand generation? And what has your experience been with respect to this, sir?
I'll try to explain it with an example. Last year, we had a scholarship budget of 1,800 crores. So what the Ministry of Expenditure did when there was a midterm RE stage, they asked for presentations. We had asked for 700 crore more money. We wanted that the academic year, in the same academic year when the scholarship is being given, it should be in the same financial year and the same academic year. There was a gap of earlier 2 to 3 years. Scholarship of 14-15 was given in 18-19 by the time the student would have left. So they asked us a detailed reasoning for that. We then showed them the system. Sir, these are our beneficiary data. These are the states who have complied with this. So you would be happy to note we got 700 crores extra last year from Ministry of Expenditure, whereas other ministries, they had even reduction in their budget. So same, whenever you are doing good, the same incentive we used in the states. So those states which were complying with the data, they were forwarding the data, they were dispersing in time, they had come from paper-based to data-based, they had integrated with our system. So we also use the same formula with them. So even last year was the first year when in the same academic year, we were able to disburse fund. Likewise, we use stick also. Those who did not, it is not only incentive, you have to use stick also. So those states which did not furnish the data or they did not comply with the monitoring system, we did not release them funds. Whatever pressure came on us, but we said, but at the same time, I will say the capacity building is equally important. Once you built up a system, data is one part. So there has to be grievance redressal also. When we talk to states, we found that there was problem in PFMS integration also. There were issues in the National Scholarship Portal. There was a registered. There were technical problems also, and it was more of a communication gap. Romil, I will slightly beg to differ with Romil that at the district level or at this lower level, there is no capacity. Romil, you won't believe even in place like Andaman Nicobar where there is no connectivity, and even in remotest of areas, LWS area and hilly areas where there is no connectivity, all our NGOs, they have been able to register online with Niti Darpan portal also. We are releasing them funds online, even the district and the states, but it needs continuous efforts, day-to-day effort. You have to continuously engage with them to do the things. Otherwise, it is not possible. So,
You're right, sir. You're right.
So incentive also work, and you have to use stick also where they are not adhering to your guidelines.
Perfect, sir. You're exactly right on this one, that both incentive and a stick model will definitely have to work. Sir, I would want to fast track this panel a little bit because we are running behind time. And one of my most important components was institutionalization of M&E systems. And that is, for that, I would request each of the members to give to basically give concluding remarks as to what according to you works when you want to institutionalize M&E systems, and what according to you are the challenges that you have overcome in the past. So basically just highlighting how can we institutionalize M&E systems in basically in your concluding remarks. I would start this with Ashutosh sir. Sir, the floor is all yours, sir, for this.
Okay, thank you, Shivangi. Actually, segregating it for monitoring and evaluation, we have been working on output-outcome monitoring framework, and over a period of time, we have realized that maybe we might have come with a very good framework, but we also need to understand the constraints, capacities of all the stakeholders. So over a period of time, we are coming across different demands, different needs, different constraints of theirs, and now we are collaborating with all the stakeholders, be it ministries, states, DOE, and other implementing agencies. So we have to see it holistically while making a institutionalization of a particular system, be it monitoring or evaluation. Maybe it can be handled through a policy or guideline from the supply side, but unless we understand the demand side requirements, maybe will not be so successful as we are aspiring for. So therefore, it's a gradual process before maybe we can take an example of APMC Act. So it was launched, but then it didn't see a success of, light of the day. So similarly, anything, it should, in my opinion, it should be a combination of supply side and demand side intervention while keeping all the stakeholders involved. So we are gradually moving towards that. Right now, we are taking by chance this year, we are going through the evaluation of all the schemes and programs. So maybe we are in a process of building capacities across ministries and departments. We are getting agencies who can handle these many evaluations. So therefore, in private sector also the capacities are getting developed. So over the process, we'll also come across different needs of different stakeholders, and then we can come across monitoring and evaluation policy, keeping all those experiences in mind. And I think then we'll be creating a successful model.
Thank you so much, sir. Actually, we have a lot of questions around institutionalization, which I feel that we can address right now. So maybe I'll open up the panel for Q&A, and I'll read the question, and it will be about institutional. I mean, it is actually tackling institutionalization. So we have Ritika from WCD department. She thinks that there's a lot of hopes in monitoring that the system lacks, and the policy is more impactful when we have some good statistics. So there is a demand, but like not from the ministry. Sir, how can we go in that direction? Basically, her question is that even though there is data, but the systems are unable to or are unwilling to take that data. Sir, I direct this question to Naval sir. Maybe you can weigh in.
This is a very good question. In fact, as I told you, a huge amount of data is coming to you. It is basically raw data. So what we did, I can tell with my example, we engaged SEDA, Center of Excellence for Data Analytics, which is under NIC. We gave them a specific target that whatever data is coming to us in different schemes, you have to analyze them, you have to put it in dashboard, and whatever reports we are asking. So, that is part one. Secondly, even in NGO scheme, what we did at the entry point only, when we are registering a NGO, we ensured that only those NGOs which have impeccable reputation. So though it was verified by the district, it was verified by the state, even then we engaged an agency, a third party agency, to evaluate each and every application of NGO, even those which were recommended by state and collector. You won't imagine out of 8 inspections which they did, two did not have any infrastructure on the ground. And then what we did, we made a complete list of points. What are the parameters for their what are the parameters for which they should be taken into the fold of the ministry. And then we had even by VC, we asked them to give a presentation. Then by going there physically also, we are checking. So that's what I'm saying. Data in itself, it does not result in, data is only a raw data. You have to utilize that data. So data analytics is important. Simultaneously, I'll say most important in monitoring and evaluation is regular physical. Physical doesn't mean going personally there, talking to them, maybe through VC, maybe through mail. And that is why in all our portals, we have compulsorily made a grievance module. So when we made it an NGO portal, even those grants which we were thinking that we have given in time, we came to know from the NGOs that they were sanctioned, say 150 students, and we gave them only 100 students, which otherwise we could not have even known. So monitoring is not only important of the other stakeholder to whom you are giving. As a organization, as a the person who is giving funds, he also has to introspect himself. He has to have a feedback mechanism how well we are doing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I think this answers the question. The next question is from Anjum Dhameja. She asked that, are there any provisions for capacity of local government bodies for leading M&E in the M&E policy? I would direct this question to Romil, since he has worked on the ground. Romil, would you want to take this question?
Yes, I think there are no institutional provisions as if now. These are basically at the initiative level that various district administration and at different state levels that they pick up their own institutions. And there were some districts which had developed the data war rooms, which were like the M&E cells which we have in some of the central ministries, and which were given the mandate of analyzing the data which is coming from the ground level and providing great insights from there. So an institutional setup, I think there itself is missing. Probably a way forward would be linking the state ATIs, the technical institutes, or for that matter, even the Labasna, to developing that. I think that will go a great way in doing a capacity building for such institutions at the ground levels as well.
Yeah, thank you for the brilliant answer. We have another question, basically, which states that, do institutionalization of monitoring and evaluation system, like, do they need to be separate, or can it be same and a single system? If it's a single system, how will the demarcation take place between monitoring and evaluation? Very, very relevant question. Dr. Ravi, would you want to take this question?
Sure, Shivangi. In fact, it can go together. In fact, in most of the countries, it goes together. And they are more or less complementing each other. So therefore, as Dr. Asutosh has said, the tone in the initial remarks, that monitoring and monitoring, guides through your processes, whereas evaluation helps you in the learning. So these are almost same coin with two faces, and they should go together. But we have separate mechanism for both monitoring and evaluation, separate tools, separate guidelines. For instance, in the monitoring, we have a lot of discussion by Ashutosh ji, Dr. Nawal. We have MIS, dashboard, all those kind of stuff. One of the things that I miss here in India is we do not have a system of post-distribution monitoring, which means that you have a monitoring of implementation process, but you do not have a monitoring of how beneficiaries are getting benefit out of it. So there is a huge scope of working towards that area. So this is towards monitoring, and evaluation has a different, guidelines and different all sorts sets of tools to go for the evaluation. So there are two different things, but yeah, should be taken together.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. We are taking the last question for the Q&A session. It's by Kalyan. And he asked that what are the effective ways for M&E startups to get in touch and collaborate with the government? I think Ashutosh sir, you will be the best person to answer this. How do startups collaborate with the government, especially for M&E?
No, actually, we are also looking collaboration partnership with all the stakeholders who are interested in this domain. So we are very eager to join all such startups who are interested, who are enthusiastic about this. So if they have any proposal, if they have any concrete plans, we are more than willing to join. They can approach us. We are the apex body in terms of monitoring and evaluation aspect is concerned in the government. So I mean they are welcome.
Thank you, sir. I think with that, it's a cue for my colleague Devika. Would request you if you could please drop in your email ID, like the DMAO partnership email ID, which can facilitate conversations like these. We have a lot of other questions as well, and would be happy to answer them via email. Thank you so much to everyone who has been who has engaged with us. Thank you so much to the 100+ participants that we had today. The response to this panel was phenomenal. Thank you to all the panelists. I really loved the personal experiences that you brought to the table. Thank you to the DMAO partnership team for organizing this and facilitating this webinar series. Thank you to DMAO leadership for making sure that the DMAO partnership organize and facilitate this series. And lastly, thank you to JPAL for organizing this, and for the audience, you have all been wonderful. Thank you so much. Do fill out the feedback survey and let us know how well we did, and let us know how best we can improve and what all we can cover. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Shivangi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shivangi. Thank you so much.